What's up, fish heads? Tony Baber here. I wanted to talk about confidence baits, why you should be using them more, why they're so important, and then I also wanted to take a few minutes and kind of cover my top three confidence baits that I use and why they're always on my deck. So let's get to it. All right, so let's talk about confidence baits. The reason why I wanted to cover this topic is as I went on this year and kind of fished more and more and got to looking at my deck, and there was certain things or a couple different rods and setups that I always have on my deck. And it's something I always go to, and it's something I always pick up and throw, and they're just things that I have a ton of confidence in. Now, you hear a lot of people talk, or at least you've probably heard it before, people talking about confidence baits and, and how they're important and things like that. But I think it's important to stress that with confidence baits, they're super important as far as your strategy goes from day in and day out, whether you're fun fishing or if you're fishing tournaments and things like that. I think it's important in your overall strategy, because if you look at some of the top pros and some of the top anglers that are out there, some of them are very consistent in the type of things that they use and the type of things that they throw and stuff like that, but they've managed to be successful at that level using those baits. So it's kind of made me think about it a little bit more and kind of focus on it or pay attention to it when I'm out there on the water. And there's always a big difference in my, at least, focus and kind of my intensity. Like, of course, I'm always intense. We're all always intense and things like that when we're out there fishing and stuff. But if you really pay attention to it, at least I've found, when I pick up something that I have a lot of confidence in, I tend to have just a little bit more focus in what I'm doing. And I think that's what makes the difference, is because fishing is obviously so mental and things like that. But if you're using something that you have a lot of confidence in, you're paying more attention to it. You're being more, what's the word I'm looking for? You're just being more focused on what you're doing. You're really paying attention to every little nuance and how you're working that bait, and you're doing exactly what you think you need to be doing. And it just seems like you have a lot more detail and a lot more focus on what you're doing whenever you're using a confidence bait. At least for me personally, that's kind of what I've noticed with it. It's something that I really think that people need to spend a lot more time using and utilizing their confidence baits when they're in those tournament situations and things like that. Because of course we all go out and we practice and we're trying to find that special pattern or just things that'll work for us come tournament day and things like that. And yes, we throw our confidence baits and sometimes we get good bites or whatever it is, or a good pattern going with our confidence baits and things like that. But then sometimes we might find something else, and that's fine. Like, we should always, of course, expand our ideas and expand our horizons and try new things and learn new techniques and get confidence in those techniques and things like that. Like, that's, of course, a huge part of tournament fishing and just fun fishing as well. But I think the thing that we need to remember, or sometimes challenge ourselves to do, is to stay committed to those confidence baits. When those times get tough, or when you're in a bad spot out there on the water where you're just not catching anything, you're not putting anything together, start picking up your confidence baits. Whether it's 1, 2, or 3, or 4 different baits, or whatever it is that you have a lot of confidence in, and start focusing on those type of baits and the structure and cover and things like that work for those type of baits. I think you'll be surprised at the amount of success that you can pick up, or the days that you can save, by really trying to approach things and attack things in that manner. So it's something to just keep in the back of your mind as far as strategy goes and confidence goes. When you're out there fishing, whether it's fun or tournaments or practice for tournaments and things like that, always try to put some effort or some time devoted to what you're confident doing, no matter what the season is, no matter what the weather is, any of that stuff. More often than not, if you're throwing your confidence bait, you can throw it and you can be successful with it no matter what the situation is. It's just something that you have more focus, you're really in tune with what you're doing, so you're gonna have more success with it just because of that. And the last thing I wanted to kind of go over, of course, was my choices. So I I picked 3 baits because it's 3 rods and reels and combos and baits and stuff that I've had on my deck pretty much all spring, summer, fall, as we're starting to make that late fall transition here. I've always had these baits on my deck, and I've almost always caught fish with them. Maybe not necessarily every day that I've fished, but usually when I pick them up, I know that I have a good chance of catching something or saving the day if I'm having a bad day and not catching anything. So the first one, of course, and I'm sure a lot of you have probably realized this or noticed this from my videos and stuff, is a spinnerbait. It's just something that it's probably one of the first baits that I really got a lot of confidence in when I first started really bass fishing and kind of really going after it and focusing on what I'm doing. And it's such a diverse bait because you can do anything from smaller size spinner baits, fishing real shallow, real slow, to heavier baits, fishing them real deep with big blades on them and stuff like that. But it just seems like the spinnerbait is something that is seasonally relevant all year round. Like it's not only good in the spring, it's not only good in the fall. You know, like you can use a spinnerbait year round, sunshine, clouds, no matter what. The only difference is the type of spinnerbait that you're using, whether you're using like a willow Indiana blade or willow Colorado blade, color combinations and things like that. All that, of course, change with the different conditions and things like that. But that's also another reason that I have a lot of confidence in it, is because I can adapt that bait to a lot of different situations. It's just something I've caught a ton of fish on over the years. One of the best pattern, or one of the best weekends, I guess you could say that I ever had, was when I had a spinnerbait pattern going and just catching fish after fish after fish, which is usually the key for something to become like a real true confidence bait for you. Is if you have a lot of success with it, you'll see that you'll gravitate to throwing that bait a lot more anyway. And that's what the spinnerbait is for me. It's something that I just love to throw. As far as my combination and what I use for it, I have a Abu Garcia Villain rod, which is something they actually don't even make anymore. Paired up with a Revo ALX, which is another reel that they've kind of modified and kind of made a little bit different than this. The reason I went with this combo is just because it's super lightweight and really comfortable to throw. This is one of the lightest reels that they make and one of the lightest rods that they used to make too, for a decent price point that wasn't, you know, $300 plus for something like that. I like using something in between like a 6'8" to a 7 foot. Usually a medium or medium heavy action, depending kind of what bait I'm using as far as what size bait. I'd say typically it's a medium action, just because I do like that little bit softer action in the reel, because I feel like it helps manage the fish better when you do hook them, as far as being able to land them and stuff. It's a fast action, so you don't have like a whole lot of bend to it, but there is, because it is medium, you do get a little bit of bend out of it. This is just kind of one of basically my setup. As far as line goes, I usually use P-line tactical fluorocarbon, anywhere from 12 to 17 pounds, kind of depends on what I'm throwing. I would say more often than not, I'm using a 15-pound test on that, honestly. If I know I'm going to be fishing a lot around bushes and cover and stuff like that, running that spinnerbait around that kind of stuff and the real nasty stuff, I'll upgrade it a little bit to 17 pound, especially if the line or if the water's a little bit dirtier, then I know I can get away with that heavier line because it's not going to be as visible anyway. But that's just some of the stuff, or I guess you could say my setup basically for the spinnerbait. That's probably one of my number one confidence baits that I use. The next one that we'll go over is a Squarebill. This is something that, again, I like to power fish. I like to cover a lot of water typically, so of course my first two confidence baits are more power fishing oriented. I love using Squarebills because I tend to gravitate more towards shallow water, as a lot of people do. But the beauty of Squarebills nowadays is they've got such a wide array of kind of styles and models and things like that, is you can cover that water column anywhere from 10 feet all the way up to, you know, a foot or even less if you're using something like a shallow runner. So that's one of the reasons I like using it, is because you can cover a lot of different areas of water and a lot of different columns of water because of the diversity and the depth that you can run a Squarebill. And of course, they're really good and efficient because they come through the water pretty clean. You know, you typically don't get snagged up a whole lot with them because they deflect off that cover really well. You can adapt the different sizes. I like using the Strike King ones, so everything from like a 1.5 shallow to a 1.0 to a 1.5, 2.5, 4.0, 8.0. I mean, the line just keeps going up. The bait sizes keep getting bigger. So, I mean, you can really match the hatch and match your forage and stuff and the size of what you're going for with the different options. And of course, they all run at different depths, which is another plus. I mean, you can control your depth with your weight on your line. If you want to go deeper, I tend to use more of like a 12-pound test. If I want something a little bit stronger, or if I want that bait to run just a little bit shallower, I'll run 17-pound test. Or if I know I'm going to be running around a lot of like big gnarly rocks, like maybe some riprap or something, I might bump up to the 17-pound test just for that extra strength. And it's the same thing on this. I use the P-Line Tactical Fluorocarbon, because it's just such a super strong line. It holds up to those gnarly kind of situations as far as abrasion or anything like that. I've never really had serious issues with it breaking on me. I can think of very few times when it ever has broken on me. Even with the line being torn up, I've still been able to catch fish and land fish successfully with it. My favorite size is probably the 1.5. I like that 2 to 4 foot range as far as the Squarebills go, plus the size of the bait is great for all year round. You know, in the springtime, it's not too overwhelming to get those finicky bass when it tends to get those cold fronts blowing through and stuff like that, but it's also great for summertime and late or early fall, I should say, when you start getting those yearlings for the shad and stuff that are starting to get big enough to where the bass will start focusing and keying in on those, because they're not real big. So you don't want a real big flashy bait like a 4.0 Squarebill or something that's got a real big body on it. You want to keep it small, and it's easy to fish and easy to get in and out of cover and rocks and wood and bushes and stuff like that because of the smaller profile. The 1.5 is another reason I like to use it. So this is a big confidence bait. I don't use it quite as much as I do a spinnerbait, but again, it's something I always have on my deck. And the last thing I'm going to cover is a little bit of a change in gears as far as the power fishing goes, because it's just one of my favorite techniques and ways to catch fish, and that's my flipping setup. So flipping and pitching a creature bait, I've got an X-Zone adrenaline bug on here. I usually go anywhere from like a 1/4 ounce all the way up to 3/4 of an ounce as far as on a bullet weight. Tungsten, always use tungsten. I use a 3/0, 4/0, and 5/0 flipping hook by Trocar. Just depends on the bait that I'm using as to what size I'm using. If I'm using something that's more of like a 5-inch creature bait, then I'll go with like a 5/0. If I'm using the adrenaline bug here, which is a 4-inch, I'll use a 4/0, because that bigger hook gives that point down lower into the bait, so that if they're just catching the very end of the bait, you're still going to get that hook point in their mouth to be able to penetrate and catch the fish. This is just something I have a lot of confidence in. Every time I see a bush or a tree or something to lay down, anything like that, I always want to pick this up and pitch it in there. I don't care what the water temperature is, what the weather is, any of that stuff. I just love pitching baits and catching fish and pulling them out of those gnarly situations where they're all tangled up in trees and stuff. To me, that's just a lot of fun. But I've caught a lot of fish doing it, and I've gained a lot of confidence in doing it. So it's definitely one of those things that I've learned and become really confident in, because it's everything from learning to skip the bait to pitching it in quietly and kind of just those presentations and really getting that, how you work the bait and feeling that bite and how that bite can differentiate between when they're being aggressive to when they're being more tentative with it, and really just having a good feel for that bite and how that fish tends to react to those baits in those situations. So it's something I have a ton of confidence in. This is probably close with, if not more, confidence as far as bait choices than the spinnerbait. It's kind of neck and neck there. I mean, those two things, I can tell you, I guarantee there's not a day this year that I've gone out fishing and not thrown at least a spinnerbait and pitched and flipped something at least once while I've been out there. Guarantee it. It's just something I have a ton of confidence in. So I'm sure you guys can think of some stuff in your head. You've probably got a couple baits already that you've thought about while watching this video that you're like, yeah, that's my confidence bait, you know, and stuff like that. Just remember those confidence baits when you get into those ruts to where you can't catch anything, or you're having a hard time, or maybe you're trying to finish out that limit and that pattern that you were working, maybe it went away. Fall back on those confidence baits, dig into them, and really commit to them. And I think you'll be surprised at your level of focus as well as your level of success when you're using those baits. I hope this helped you guys. Hope you have a good day. Good luck and good fishing.